Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to the SWOP Colloquium on the meanings of Marikana. It's going to be a great program and a great couple of days. My pleasure is to welcome the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Finance and Operations, Professor Tawana Kupe, who is going to open the colloquium. Now, Tawana has been in this position for about a year. Prior to that, he was the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities here at Wits. And over his period of tenure in the faculty, he turned it into the most vibrant, intellectually and culturally, the most vibrant Faculty of Humanities in the country, and the leading Faculty of Humanities actually. So he's really been a great force for change and for intellectual work at the university, and he's also been a great friend of SWOP over this time. So it's a real pleasure to welcome him, and can we just have a round of applause for Tawana? Right, Tawana, over to you.
Dean and going forward, SWOP was a great friend of mine for many reasons. But I'm here really to give you a very warm welcome to Wits, Faculty of Humanities, and most importantly to the SWOP Institute. I think we in the Faculty of Humanities and in the university have many institutes, but I think that SWOP is one of our best institutes in the way in which it connects intellectual life to real life out in the world on major issues that affect our society, the continent, and even the world. It's interesting for me today that I wake up and first thing I do is to come and open a conference on the meanings of Marikana, implications for a post-apartheid South Africa. Some of you might know that last night, which was my last act, I was at a lecture by Cyril Ramaphosa, the Deputy President of the ANC, where he was talking about the National Development Plan, in which Carl is implicated, because he's one of the commissioners. But I know that Carl takes a critical attitude to the NDP. Him and I used to talk a lot about it. So at this lecture yesterday, one of the more interesting things was that some miners from Marikana came in a bus. They came again a few weeks ago at another event, and other support groups associated with Marikana, what happened in Marikana. Striking thing about the Cyril's lecture is that he actually didn't mention Marikana in his 1.5 hour talk or more. He only mentioned it because there was a lot of heckling and booing, you can imagine, and a lot of protest. He only mentioned it in response to questions. And when he did, this is what he said, and I'll try and quote him verbatim: poor eyesight but good memory. He said something like this: well, there are platforms where we can talk about Marikana. He'd also been asked about the question of legal fees. He said, well, you see, I think we'll find a solution, and the solution can be found, the solution will be found, that political way of talking. And that was all he said about Marikana. At least today, I wake up and come to a colloquium or a conference where we will talk, Marikana will be center stage in a title called The Meanings of Marikana, not just the meaning of Marikana. In Cyril's talk last night, the meaning of Marikana was subsumed in the meaning of the contribution of the mining industry to national development. But I'll do so short here.
Every time.
Nick Naylor of Ford, thank you very much for your support, and Axel Schmidt of Frederick Herbert Sifton. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of you who have made contributions with abstracts, who will contribute today, and also wish you deep, rich discourse, conversations, dialogue, and sharing of ideas. I'm doing this quite quickly, and also I can't stay with you, because believe it or not, I'm going to teach an undergraduate, a postgraduate class right now on political economy of African media systems. One of the things I'm going to talk about is the coverage of Marikana in the media and the political economy of the media and its relationship to mining capital. So I'll publish that article in the review of African Affairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tawana, for that opening. And then we close with a panel looking at the broader implications of Marikana. Now, the cherry on top of the colloquium is what happens tonight, the movie, the making of Marikana, and we are really excited and honored to be to have the first viewing of a Riyadh Desai's movie, The Making of Marikana. It's still a work in progress, so you could call this the world pre-premiere for the movie, and I think it's going to be an absolutely fascinating viewing as well as discussion. And I must stress that it's a private viewing. It's not open to the public. It's open to, or rather, it's restricted to all of those who've registered for the conference and will be able to attend later together with a finger supper. So that's the structure of the program that we're going to work through over the next 2 days. I do want to say just about SWOP that this colloquium is focused on the meanings of Marikana. SWOP's research into mining, its current research, our current research into mining, did not start with Marikana. It's been something that we've been working on over the last 3 or 4 years, developing a research program looking at the contrasts between the declining gold mining sector, which rose to prominence under apartheid, and the new platinum mining sector, the rising post-apartheid platinum boom. And in that program, you will have noticed that in the program for this colloquium, we say nothing about the environment. And that's not because we ignore the environment at all. That's a large part of our research program. But this is only the first in a series of colloquia that will be running over the next 2 or 3 years, in which we'll be presenting a wider range of research into environmental impacts and implications, urbanization and spatial development, mine closures and former mine workers and livelihoods, violence in the mining industry, the meanings of Moodie to mine workers, as well as the themes that we are looking at in this colloquium, which we will pursue through the other colloquia as well. So that's just to let you know that not only SWOP's commitment, but your commitment as a participant audience is to a series of colloquia over the next 2 or 3 years. That's the introduction to the colloquium over. We now move to the first panel, which is really the panel of opening remarks by Dunbar Moodie, who is co-convener of the colloquium with Gavin, and by Ray Bush from Review of African Political Economy and Leeds University. So Ray has been working on political economy of Africa and further afield over many, many years, and has published widely. His most recent book, an edited collection with Habib Ayer, is Marginality and Exclusion in Egypt, published by Z Books last year. We're very glad to have Ray with us, not only for his own sake, but also for his role in the Review of African Political Economy, and we also want to thank him, of course, again for the support for the colloquium. Dunbar is a South African who has been in a kind of exile, limbo in the far west in the US for a long time, but has always come back here to do his research and has become a visiting research professor at SWOP. Will be spending the next 3 years with us. He's the author of many, many articles, but his 2 key books that you will know are his first one, The Rise of Afrikanerdom, which is really a path-breaking analysis of Afrikaner nationalism, and then Going for Gold, which I always introduce as, well, let me put it this, a lot of sociology is pretty undigestible, pretty clunky. You don't read it for pleasure, you read it, you have to dig away to get at the knowledge in it. Dunbar's work is a sociology that sings. There's not a lot of sociology that sings, but Dunbar's does. He doesn't quite rise to singing a song when he talks though, but it's really great to have him with us as really the kind of primary analyst of labour in the mining industry. The book that he's working on now is a history of the rise and current position of the National Union of Mine Workers. So those are our two speakers who are going to open the conference with some perspectives on mining internationally and in South Africa. I'm going to hand over to you, Ray.
Thanks very much. It's a wonderful opportunity to both. Thanks very much for the opportunity to say a few words, not only about. Is this working?
Yeah, it's working.
Not only about rope, but also to make a few comments about mining and the political economy of mining. I mean, we at ROPE are really delighted to be able to help in a small way support this workshop and also renew links with Gavin, who has published on platinum in ROPE already. This is a great opportunity to learn about the intense struggles at Marikana, but also about the importance of the new political economy of platinum in South Africa. I should say too that ROPE will, towards the end of this year, publish a issue on South Africa, edited by two guest editors from BICS, Nicholas Convignon and Aurelia Kabwe-Sigati. So it's a great opportunity for us to be here and also to think about upcoming contributions from you all to ROPE. So it's a great opportunity for me to have this advertising campaign. We have published 3 issues on resources and mining since the early 90s, and I think it would be fair to say that much of the consequences of extractives and development in Africa that we've explored have been negative. I mean, here in South Africa, amongst other things, where mining has led to capitalist development and constructed a particular and distinctive pattern of industrialization with minerals energy complex, it's also shaped and been shaped by a kind of regional dynamics of labor migration, uneven integration, but also the anomaly of some of the highest global wealth disparities. Some of the highest global wealth disparities here in South Africa and also in neighboring mineral-rich Botswana. And those global wealth disparities, the intensity of them, challenges the persistent rhetoric amongst donors and by corporations that mining is good for development. And this binary of mining and development is something I think that we have to, and I'm sure in the next couple of days, will be problematized. It certainly needs to be unpacked. I think it's particularly important to do so now at a time of strikes, of protest, of state and corporate violence, but also because across the continent there is also another wave of optimism. A wave of optimism rushing over donors, policymakers, influencing the way in which mining is viewed as a tool for development. And that new optimism is spread not only by Western international financial institutions like the Bank and the Fund, but also by African, Pan-African institutions themselves, like the Economic Commission for Africa, for example. The ECA has spoken about Africa's awakening, the need to unleash Africa's potential as a pole of global growth, and the evidence to sustain that rhetoric is the optimism rooted around the role of extractives, of mineral wealth and development. And the evidence is drawn from that tremendous period of so-called economic growth between 2002 and 2008, of an average growth in sub-Saharan Africa of more than 5%. These statements about optimism, about mining and development through mining as an opportunity, is now set in the context of a post-2008 slump. It's set in the context of financialization, it's set in the context of delisting of mining companies from Africa to Europe, with reduced local state controls, and of course the demands for enhanced shareholder value as returns to African states and communities affected by mining fall. Moreover, donors and policymakers stress that Africa's awakening, although I'm really not quite sure what it's an awakening from, is a failure to understand that still more than 80% of the continent's exports come from hydrocarbons and from agricultural products, which raises the obvious issue of the failure of diversification, the failures of local beneficiation. Now, South Africa may be alone in sub-Saharan Africa in the way that extractives can and have been promoted in terms of an extensive industrial strategy. But South Africa is not immune from broader processes of transformation in the extractive sector and the policy debate about how to manage it. And one of the most significant of these is the way that commodity booms and subsequent slumps have generated resource nationalism. Extractives generate, we know, super profits. Mining companies perhaps have superpowers. Companies famously bemoan their condition, but they're never shy to celebrate their success. The current downturn in prices is explained by an increase in operational costs, threats of resource nationalism, and it led the influential PricewaterhouseCoopers 2013 review of the global trends in mining to lament an 8% return on capital employed in 2012, down from a peak of more than 23% in 2006. But the calculation they don't publicise is that if you look at the average return between 2002 and 2012, it's almost 15%. Net profits rose for 80% of the world mining industry by 64% between 2005 and 6. That actually translates into an increase of 1,423% compared with the 2002 levels, a return on equity of 33%. Now, the boom in mining, the difficulties that African governments have had in limiting corporate power was the context for, I think, still a somewhat unpublicised African Union intervention in the mining and minerals debate. And this is an intervention which has led to ratification of something called the African Mining Vision 2050, which was ratified by ministers in 2009. Now, I mean, quickly, I just want to say a few words about this before summing up. Now, this African Mining Vision has set a pan-African agenda. A pan-African agenda that calls for a collective response to mining, a collective response to transnational corporate extortion, and it also offers, and I think this is absolutely important, it offers a very strong critique of the history of resource extraction in Africa. The Mining Vision critiques the old grandiose plans of what they see as the mining box of unsustainable capital-intensive mining projects, and also the over-dependence upon foreign capital. What it doesn't ask, and of course there are many ways in which we can critique the Mining Vision, what it doesn't ask are questions about how states can retain earnings from national mining companies. How can states retain the earnings from national mining companies? Something that's crucial to promoting a locally based process of industrialization. But interestingly, last month in Lusaka, at the African Initiative of Mining, Environment and Society, AIMS, they promoted a further round of discussions with the Union around how the vision can be implemented. And the African Union itself has established a mining development centre to try and promote and implement the mining vision. A vision that wants to interrogate the relationships between states and companies, and between states, companies and communities impacted by mining. And it seems to me that this is an important, it's very easy to scoff at Pan-Africanist institutional initiatives, but it also provides a very interesting potential framework, arena within which bargains can be explored. And probably an indication of just how significant that vision is was the way in which the West and mining companies themselves have responded to it. And they've responded to it in a thoroughly, I think, scurrilous way. The EU and mining houses have rejected legally binding codes of free, prior and informed consent regarding extractives. The EU, with its support through the Raw Materials Initiative of 2008, effectively securitizes access to resources for them to promote the sound functioning of the European Union's economy. And the Perth Commonwealth Ministers' Declaration, just 2011, has promoted something called the Commonwealth Mining Network, something that avoids any talk about local access, local control of resources, the possibilities for local beneficiation, and instead talks again about the maximization of private sector involvement in mineral exploration, focusing on trade, investment, and opportunities for private capital. Now, mining companies are weathering what they see to be a storm of opposition after the mining boom of 2007, which they described as the sector saying it never gets better than this. Companies are on the offensive. PricewaterhouseCoopers, its voice piece, has basically said, to quote them, being tough with mining companies might look good to stakeholders at home in the short run, but government should consider a broader view of a return for natural resource development. Mining activities provide jobs, direct and indirect payroll, taxes and so on. But just what kind of jobs are generated, what happens to labour, is an important dimension and will be discussed here in the next 2 days, namely the role of labour mobilisation, forms of organisation, new trades unions organisation, issues of labour hire and labour process, and different types of security and informalisation. And linked to some of these labour issues will also be the continuing transformation of rural South Africa. To take on the point that was made, I think very importantly, the continuing transformation of rural South Africa connected in different ways to the mining sector. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray, for those very useful remarks on the wider context and some of the struggles over mining, which we'll take up in panels later today. Next, Dunbar.
Yeah, is this thing on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right. I wanted to move from the African context more specifically to South Africa and particularly to platinum, and talk a little bit first of all about SWOP's involvement with platinum, because this is the conference about the meanings of Marikana, but SWOP's been involved in platinum mining for a good while, and Marikana is an outcome that I think a lot of the work that SWOP has been doing means that it was not a big surprise. So let me do something. Old men like to tell stories, right? Let me do something to kind of talk about how SWOP sort of developed its current involvement, particularly with platinum. Since 1998, SWOP has conducted a series of studies of service delivery for the NUM at the invitation of the union. Andries Bezetenout, is Andries here?
He's here.
He's coming anyway. Was involved? He's here.
Yeah, there at the back.
Hi, Andries. He was involved in all these surveys, and it's a result of his initiative that two current PhD students in SWOP are working on platinum mining, and both Crispin and Asanda will be doing presentations later in the colloquium. Meanwhile, when I came here as a visiting professor to SWOP in 2011, Andries and Sekela Buhlungu took me on a little trippy to Welkom to see what was happening with gold mining, which is the area that I've been working on now for Well, I started my research in Welkom in 1975. It was an eye-opener to go to Welkom. A trip down memory lane, but also a shock of realization. When I started my research in Welkom in 1975, there were 9 mines, each with at least 4 shafts, many with more than that. There's now 1. The gold mining industry clearly is on a downward trend. There's still a lot of gold under the ground in South Africa, but it's very, very deep. You can go below 5 kilometers, you can still get gold in South Africa, but going below 5 kilometers is very expensive. And at the same time, as a direct result of my conversations with Andries and Sekela, I helped draft a proposal to the NRF suggesting a comparison of the dying gold industry, focusing on Welkom and the booming platinum industry in Rustenburg. Andries helped with that proposal, as did Carl and May Hermanus, and I found an intellectual home in SWOP. But the real breakthrough to platinum in SWOP came at the International Mining History Conference in 2012, when Gavin Capps approached me with the suggestion that his potential Martisa project might find a home in SWOP. Gavin and I hit it off at once, and he sent on to me and to Carl some of his written stuff, including his PhD thesis. I was overwhelmed. This guy's been working for more than a decade in the platinum industry, and he's covered a huge range of aspects of platinum. Having Gavin become part of SWOP concretized our commitment to taking platinum very seriously indeed, although the research in Welkom also continues. And then it was not until after the Marikana events that I discovered that Paul Stewart, an old friend and a SWOP associate, had also been involved with platinum well before the Marikana events. And so now we're all here, along with a panoply of others, to wrestle with questions about platinum industry and the implications that have arisen from the Marikana massacre. Perhaps it would help if I take just a few minutes at the end of my opening remarks here to point up some of the differences that strike me and have struck me as I've turned from my 30-odd years of messing around with gold towards looking at the platinum industry. What are the differences? What are the important differences that I see, at any rate, coming from gold to moving towards understanding what's going on in the platinum mining industry? I'm going to leave aside, at least for the moment, differences specifically regarding labor organization, because I'm going to be dealing with that in my presentation at the tail end of tomorrow. But let me just try and talk about what seems to me to be striking differences between gold and capital as aspects of mining in South Africa. But first, it's very important to say, both are enormously capital intensive. Both are or were concentrations of ore, of metal, of available extractive wealth that exist in South Africa and are of unique proportions in terms of their share of the world supply. during the last century, for most of the century, all the banks in the old, quote, West, unquote, ran on gold. Gold basically obtained off the backs of cheap black labor. And now, close to 80% of the platinum group metals available. And it's not just platinum we're talking about here. There are 6 platinum group metals.